Ruth is coming, it says. So we will wait for Ruth to pop on. Here she is.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Got it this time.
Yeah, that didn't take very long at all. I'm so glad we are getting it. You know, you just always have to do it and then you know. You don't know until you do it. We've talked about this like 100 times, and I've read about it and you've read about it, and we didn't know how to do it until we did it. So, yep. Okay. So, high value women through healthy boundaries. And I'm going to let you take it away. We talked about a lot of stuff before we started to record. So you just take it away and we'll talk about all the things.
Let's take it away. All right. So I like to hear I like to get people's credibility. I don't know why. Maybe I'm like, there's so many people in the world to hear from. There's so many approaches. I like to have the angle from which they're coming from. So I had terrible boundaries my whole life. I didn't realize I had terrible boundaries because I didn't understand what boundaries were, but I had terrible boundaries my whole life. I was always around dramatic people. I was always, I found myself resentful a lot in a lot of relationships. I felt like most of my relationships were very one-sided and I couldn't figure out why, or abusive situations like everywhere. And my moment of like, what is going on was when I just had my 4th baby and I felt so crazy and so like just this point of life where I was legitimately looking for somebody to take guardianship of my children and check myself into a mental institution. I thought I was legitimately crazy, and it turns out I wasn't crazy. I just had really bad boundaries, and I had just let everyone walk all over me and suck me dry, and I, gaslighting and kinds of things where I just didn't trust myself in any situation. I didn't think I was qualified for anything because I had just been completely sucked dry. So boundaries, let's see, this was about 5 years ago, and now my life is wonderful. My relationships are wonderful. Like I'm very happy, and I am pretty confident in any situation that I walk into, or I just know like, that's not a situation I want to play with. So all of these are good boundaries. So that's a good balance. Those are good backgrounds. Okay, so what is a boundary? A boundary is just a property line. That's the simplest way, like how we have fences around things. I usually share an image. I guess I can share on this soon, but okay, so boundaries, we understand with fences, it's basically saying this is my property and something happens in this property. Like this property is for use, and unless you're invited in, like don't cross the fence line, right? Like we understand that. Walls around buildings, fences, we understand that. Somebody owns it, somebody is responsible for taking care of it, and anybody who is outside of that responsibility needs permission to use that property. Okay. Okay, and now in Kentucky, I lived in Kentucky for about 6 or 7 years while my husband was doing residency, and the fields there are gorgeous, like just like 100, 200, 700 acres of just gorgeousness mowed for 1 horse, 2 horses, 3 horses. And then they have fences around everything, the beautiful Kentucky white fences. And I noticed that there's would be 2 fences around the same like pasture area. And since I know how expensive fences are, I was always like, why would you do that? And we thought maybe trucks could drive through, but lots of the times they would be bushes, which really added confusion. So I finally was like, I have to figure out like, why are they doing this? And turns out that the fences are to keep you away from the horses and the horses away from you, or like neighboring horses in like neighboring corrals. It keeps the horses away from each other, because you can still walk up to the fence and pet and stroke these millions of dollars worth, these horses. I pet a horse once that was like $70 million, like just, right? So if you start to mess around with that horse, or if that horse bites you, it's all kinds of liability. And then you have these hot-tempered horses. If it's just one fence, then they can get each other over the fence. So there's 2 fences to keep everything away from each other. And that's how your boundaries are. You have an internal boundary and you have an external boundary. Both of the boundaries are for your protection, your responsibility, your decision. But one is to keep you inside. That's where like you are responsible for your thoughts. You are responsible for your emotions, for the way you use your resources, your time, your energy, right? How you treat people, the words you use, all of those things. You own that. You are responsible for carrying all of that. And then you have your external boundary, which is what you say, how you let other people into your life. And it keeps their crap on their side, their emotions, the use of their resources, their expectations, all of those things. It keeps them on that side. And then you have a gate. That external boundary has a gate, and you decide who comes in and how they use your property, how they use your time, how they use your energy. You decide, and you just like kick them right on out and close that gate when it's right. And each person and each situation you work in, the fence is, it's a fence. It's not a brick wall. It's not like, I think a lot of times we think I'm either an open pasture or I'm like a brick wall with broken glass on the top and wires. Like there's, I think that's one of the reasons why we're afraid of boundaries, is we think it's just like that gross, isolating, kind of like complete shutout sort of thing. But it's not. It's a fence line, and you can put your fence line wherever you want to, and you can open that gate anytime you want to. It's your property. You get to decide. And we get messed up in the boundaries when we don't understand who owns what. And then the other thing is, we understand we own it. Like we understand that this is my time or my energy, and I would like I have the fence there, but other people don't give a crap. They still come in. They still ask me to do things. They still don't hold up their end of the bargain, like all those kinds of things. Well, then what do I do? Right. Mm-hmm. I think the example that prompted this last time was, there's a girl around town who's saying mean things about me. She's slandering my reputation, or like, we didn't get the full details, but so those kinds of things. And important to know is, boundaries are not about changing somebody's behavior. It's not about controlling or changing their behavior. Boundaries do influence somebody's behavior, but only in regarding to how they interact with you. Mm-hmm. Right. So you're not going to say, you can never do this. It's just when you're with me, or when you're on my property, or when you're around me, this is the behavior that I expect. And if that boundary isn't respected, then I simply withdraw myself, and you don't get to use my property anymore. And then the consequences are really important. If there's a boundary violation, there's probably not a good consequence. There has to be a consequence, or it just becomes nagging, which is like the word that women, we don't want to be a nagger. It's just not efficient. And that's what happens is, you're stating your boundary over and over, but there's no consequence. So there's no
respect.
Yeah, there's just no respect for it. It doesn't, whatever. You have the fence line, but if somebody doesn't respect fences and they climb over and they start to steal your property, like, well, the guns might need to come out. Right. Otherwise, the fence is just for fun.
An obstacle.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's see, maybe signs of a good boundaries. If you have good boundaries, it means you can walk into a situation and just have total confidence that either everyone involved will behave well, or at least you will behave well no matter what. So a simple example would be, if you have internal boundaries, would be what I put into my mouth, right? I have a goal of what I want my physique to be, what kind of nutrition I want to enter my body, what kind of nutrition I don't want to enter my body, those kinds of things. If I go to a family party or a church party or something, and there is just like food out there, I am responsible for my boundary of what does and what doesn't come into my body. I cannot be mad at people for offering or bringing things that are contrary to my boundaries. Right? Yep. I can decide whether or not to participate in those kinds of things or not. But if I have good, strong boundaries, then I know I can walk into any church party and nothing's going in my mouth that I don't want to go in there. Right? Yep. Or like if there are people who have poor behavior, they swear, or they don't believe the same things politically, or Maybe they like to make jabbing comments. Maybe they're just straight up insulting. It's a family reunion, right? Like, let's just use that scenario. You have that uncle, the stereotypical uncle who just doesn't know, or maybe he likes to get he likes to get a rise out of people. You just know that you are responsible for you. He's responsible for him. No matter what he says, you're not going to say anything that's going to end up on like the family Facebook for years and years and years of like, look at what Ruth did. You just know that you're going to behave well to either leave the situation or just not instigate. Those are good boundaries. Okay. Signs of poor boundaries would be rebellion. If there is a heightened sense of rebellion, like I have to protest or things like that, then that's signs that there are poor boundaries. Not that rebelling is bad. I think rebelling can be good because it's this fight of who owns the property.
Mm-hmm.
So toddlers have a state of rebellion and teenagers have a state of rebellion because everybody's trying to figure out what do they own. And that's the only way you figure out what you own is by like playing in the property. Sexual promiscuity is often, well, it is. It's trying to figure out what you own. If somebody else has told you things about yourself, you know, if you're a skater, if you have sex with people, if you go to work, if you don't go to work, like all these things, it means you're like, whatever it is, you're just trying to figure out what do you own? Like, what do you really have a decision in? So rebellion is a sign that that healthy boundaries are not present. Counterdependence is also a thing. It's kind of like rebellion, but rebellion is just like, I'm going to do everything bad in a way. And counterdependence is whoever I'm trying to have the boundary with, whatever they say, I'm going to do the opposite, whether or not it's good for me. Like, if they hadn't said anything, I might have made the decision that was good for me. But because they got involved, now just out of spite, I'm going to do the opposite. That's counterdependence. If there's resentment, ladies, listen up. If there is resentment, that is a sign, that is probably one of the greatest signs, the most common signs that there are unhealthy boundaries. If you are concerned about how somebody else's behavior, your child, your husband, your friend, the church, the government, like whatever it is, if you're afraid of their behavior reflecting poorly on you, that could be a sign of poor boundaries. If there's yelling and anger, that's a sign that there's poor boundaries. Okay. Let's see, what are some other things I want to talk about? So there's, with boundaries, it gets funny because you're like, well, what can I put a boundary around? Kids and husbands get really tricky because our lives are so involved. Then you're like, well, what do I own and what don't I own? We've made agreements on things, or like I'm responsible for raising them. So what do they get to own and what do I get to own? So I just go back to what's healthy entitlement or what's immature entitlement. There are very few things that we're actually entitled to, like just naturally for being us. You know, I could argue that everybody is entitled to loving parents. I could argue that, but if you don't have a loving parents, I mean, there's still a thing. Like, I know my kids get really angry and entitled to my time and my energy, my attention. Like, they just want me to just sit on the couch waiting for them to say, Mom, I want food. Mom, I want games, right? So although they are entitled to my love and my attention, they are not entitled to it all the time under any conditions. Like, you know, it's not all there. So there's things like that. There still gets to be boundaries because essentially it is my time, it's my attention, it's my energy, it's all of it. I get to own that. I choose how that's bestowed for the good of my family, because I do believe that the care of my family is inside my internal boundary.
Yeah, which I think that conversation with moms is the one I have the most, I think, in my coaching program, is moms just feel guilty if their kids need something and they don't rush right in and do it, you know? And I think I was on a float trip this last weekend with my family. My sister-in-laws and I were having a conversation while we were floating down the river about that our kids don't know how to problem solve, like in general, you know, My kids, her kids, her kids, her kids, like we were all discussing the situation, and it's our kids don't know how to problem solve. And one of my sister-in-laws brought to our attention, we were at a family reunion a couple of weekends ago, and my cousin, her little boy was up in the tree. And, the kids were climbing the trees all the time, whatever. It's a great big tree. And her little boy was climbing the tree, and he was like, Mom, I need to get down. I'm scared. I need to try to get down. Now, he wasn't very far up in the tree. Like if he were to even fall down, it probably would hurt, but I likely not break his arm. Like likely he wouldn't be hurt to the point where we'd have to take him in. Right. But obviously we don't want him to fall. That's not something that we want him to do. Right. But she's came over and said, okay, she said his name, look at where you are. Just pause. You're not in danger right now. Look at where you are. What do you think the next step is that you need to take to get yourself out of the tree? And my sister-in-law was watching this, and she was like, oh my gosh, she's mothering him. Like she's helping him problem solve. She's being a good mother, where a good mother would have him problem solve, would help him get down, not get him down. And not like we'll help him get down, help him get down. We think that means go take him out of the tree and put him on the ground.
Yes.
But my sister-in-law was like, she was mothering him in a really good way, meaning helping him problem solve, helping him look for ideas and look for ways that he could get himself down out of the tree. And we had this whole big conversation as we were floating down the river about how each one of us took a turn. Like I just save my kids instead of helping them be able to problem solve, helping them look for ways that they can get themselves out of that situation. And we all, as moms, I think we want to come in and save the day. That's not a bad thing, but it can be a bad thing if we're just constantly going in and saving our kids and not helping them problem solve, helping them get out of the situation themselves. We're walking next to them, kind of, okay, well, what do you think we should do next? What do you think we should do next? All the while knowing that they're safe, making sure that he was safe in the tree, that he wasn't going to fall out. She was right there. If he made a wrong step and slipped, she was right there to catch him. But she was also there to, what do you think you should do next? What do you think would happen if you put your foot here? Maybe we should try this. Maybe we should try that. All the while there if he fell. And we all just thought, wow, we need to do a better job at helping our kids problem solve, which is also helping them with boundaries, like making sure that my boundary is, I don't have to go in and save my kids all the time. Just because they say, Mom, I need help, doesn't mean that I need to go do the thing for them. Mom, I need help is like a default sentence in their brain that they just say when they don't want to do something. But my boundary is, okay, why don't you try to do it yourself? Or are you in danger? Or is this something that they can do on their own and they just don't want to? And then I need to help them want to,
Our job as a mom is to help people successfully own their own property. Like that's, our children need to successfully own their own property.
Mm-hmm.
Understand, like, obviously you're not going to be like, okay, newborn, get your food. That's your property.
Yeah.
I'm not like they grow into it. We teach them to grow into it. And the same way we step away. We step away. And that word help, that's to be helpful. That's something I like actually coach people on. I have a whole acronym on like how to determine if it's actually helpful. But the whole goal as a parent or a mentor or anything is to help people own their property successfully.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because the other thing is, in order to do that, you have to know what's yours to own so that you can help that person that you're with, help them know what's theirs to own. And I think this is probably, I mean, we can talk about this in marriages. We can talk about this in parenting. We can talk about this in church callings. We can talk about this in, neighbors, community, all the things. If you understand what it is for you to, is yours to own, then it's much easier to help another person know what's theirs to own. when you're in a relationship with them, however that is.
Yeah. And this just goes right back to that original drawing that we showed last week about how women teach women how to be women. We
Mhm.
teach each other. Like, I mean, one of the sentences, are you concerned about how other people's behavior reflects on you? Like, what is my mom going to think if my kids are
Mhm.
behaving this way? What's the neighbor going to think? What's the church lady going to think? What's the, like, all those things. Like, if my kids behave this way, what are people thinking about me?
Mhm.
There's a boundary thing. Their behavior has nothing to do with you. Children, I like, because you are the disciplinarian, like you're
Yeah.
the mentor. Sometimes, but sometimes it's just because they're kids. It's not anything bad
Mhm.
about it. It can be a sign, like, is like just you learned, like, is there a way that I can approach my parenting better?
Mhm.
But not always. And you stressing about it, like that doesn't
Mhm.
not
Well,
helpful.
and for me, it's like, is there a way that I can look at my parenting better because I want to be a better parent, not because I think that I'm a terrible parent and there's something wrong with me.
Yes.
There's a difference between that, like shaming myself because I'm a terrible person and I'm such a bad parent. And that's what everyone thinks of me, is I'm a bad parent. I need to figure out how to do this better. And I wonder if I could do some things a little bit better because it would help me and it would help them.
Yes.
That's different.
Like what I commonly see and what I also experienced of like, oh my gosh, they're thinking this, or they might be thinking this. So I'm going to come in and do something really honestly damaging to my child
Mm-hmm.
to try and
Yeah.
get them to change their behavior right now because I'm afraid of, right? Like we violate their boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
We just own things that we shouldn't own, and we usurp things that we shouldn't usurp because we're afraid of what this other person is thinking, because we think that we own, like, it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, it's just this whole thing of like all the reasons why it's boundary problem.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Love it.
Okay. So then another really good point that I want to add out, because the topic today is how to be becoming a high value woman through healthy boundaries. And one of the most powerful things that a woman can do is her ability to say no. The more a woman can say no, the higher her value is, unlike everybody's definition. Her ability to say no. Because what that means is we have confidence, we have opportunities, we have strength, we have wisdom. And if we don't have those things, we're just going to say yes out of desperation. We're afraid we're going to lose love, reputation, safety, something if we say no. But a valuable woman, a useful woman knows, no, like I got this. There's 1,000 opportunities that would say yes to me. I can say no to this one.
Mm-hmm.
So your ability to say no wisely, judiciously, responsibly is one of the greatest powers you have.
I love it.
Okay. And then I also want to say that we want to use our no, I say in a girl power way, just because I don't want to say it, as opposed to like a feminist way. And the way I say that, the way I identify the two is with like this girl power thing. It's kind of being usurped in a weird way, but what it does is we just demand that everybody has healthier boundaries. Like we all get better. Women have more opportunities, men have more opportunities. There's more accountability for everybody. But the feminist way is like, well, we can just all behave poorly now.
Yeah, right. Right.
Like men behave poorly in this way. And so we want equality in our ability to behave poorly too.
Yes. Right.
Which is just, I would rather just like, we become better. We have the opportunities that are totally like are in our ability, but it's not at the destruction or the emasculation or the emulation of poor behaving men.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. Oh, there's another little point. There's judging boundaries. That's another big point. If you judge people's boundaries, then their behavior. Okay, so one of the like coin phrases of a narcissist, like to check if your narcissism is coming out, is if you say, why can't they just? If you hear yourself saying that or somebody else saying that, that experience is being led by narcissism. Why can't they
Really?
just? Yes.
Okay, explain.
Well, most of the time it's because you want them to do something so that you don't have to do something,
Mm,
right? So it's all
Okay.
about your needs and wants rather than their experience. It's also according to your perspective and not, it
mhm.
usually indicates something's missing.
Hmm.
And the energy is different than, I wonder why they're doing it that way. I obviously can't say, I wouldn't do it that way. I can't see why they would do it that way, but the energy is different. Like, I wish I understood them better to like, why can't they just? You can feel it, right? You can feel it different.
Mhm.
So let's see. So judging boundaries also, this is okay. So women who are kind-hearted and they want to make people happy, we drive ourselves crazy trying to make people comfortable because we think it's what they want.
Mhm.
They think that this is their boundary, but it makes them crazy. Okay, so for example, well, there's two. Okay, so here's one. So I grew up with, my mom was amazing. I call her lovingly Miss Home Economics because like literally her degree was in home economics. When she met my dad, she was the high school home economics teacher. And this was back in the 70s when home economics actually meant something.
Mhm.
By the time it got to me, I think we were like sewing wind, like whatever the things that blew in the wind just because it was straight lines. And maybe we were making like no-bake cookies. And then I don't think my brother even had home economics. I think that by that time it had been deemed sexist and was gotten rid of.
Mhm.
But like legit home economics. She loves to cook. She's, great at organizing. She gets way more done in a day than most people get done in a year. Like the woman is incredible. And I think I could count on one hand how many times I ate at a restaurant my entire childhood. Well, I guess until I started working at a restaurant. She was just always taking care. And my dad, he didn't get home till late. He was a UPS driver and he would get home at like 9, 10 at night. And she always had his little plate prepared and she would sit down with him and she would talk with him. And she always made his lunches to go to work. She always packed his bags when we went on trips. Like the woman just treated him like a king. He never did dishes. Like after we had dinner, if we had dinner together, he would just go lay down on the floor in front of the furnace. And then, we would take care of the kitchen. He would help during holidays, but like that was it. So I started to see that as like, oh, my old school dad, like leaving the women in the kitchen, that kind of stuff, which is funny because I would go help him at work. He never said that. He never said women's roles. Like I never felt that, but just the way I was interpreting this circumstance with the feministic voices from the world in my head, like I interpreted that that's the dynamic. So when I was a mom and my always gone, he was always showing up for dinner at random times, or she would also get up in the morning and make him breakfast early in the morning. I hate to cook. Like I just, and I was always feeling guilty, like why, I should be this kind of mom, or I don't know. And finally there was just a lot of resentment that I had in me. And I had this conversation with her. I probably had 2 or 3 kids at this point. Like, Mom, why did you always let Dad do that? Why did you always have that dynamic go down? And she was just like, whoa, hold the phone. I did that because I wanted to. I wanted to love him in that way. And it was just kind of like a huge bubble burst for me. And it was a lot of clarity and it was a lot of permission.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted to do it that way. Mm-hmm. She could do it lovingly. It wasn't like she was afraid that somebody was going to think she was a bad wife. That's how she loves. She loved what she got out of the relationship when she loved him that way. And I get to love my husband in a way that I can love genuinely. Again, that sign of, is there resentment? If there's resentment, it's a sign of poor boundaries. And again, what do you own? If you feel like you don't own the ability to cook your husband food, like you feel like he owns that and either society forces that on you or he forces that on you, that's a boundary violation. But if you want to love him in that way, do it, right? Do it. So I think that's really key. So I was judging her boundary. And then also another example was, so we've just recently moved, we've got a new ward again, we moved 1,000 times. So we've had many, many new wards, and it's always, an adventure to see what the culture and the dynamic of the ward is. And Christian religions, we have kind of crappy boundaries because we misunderstand our responsibility in people's salvation, the fellowshipping, being offensive, those kinds of things that can be crazy. So this new ward, very friendly, like extremely friendly, very warm, very embracing. It was a bit smothering though. Honestly, it was a bit overwhelming. And my daughter has great friends in our old ward, and she just wasn't quite ready to switch over. She said the girls were very friendly, that even the Sunday school lesson was very good, but she just wasn't ready to let go of her old life, her old friends, like, because it's, once you aren't going to church with them on Sunday and having youth activities every week, I mean, it does, she can still call them up, but it is different. So she just wasn't ready for us to like totally switch over to the new address, to the new group of people at church. And so we were like, okay, we won't have our records transferred just yet. And the young women president was behind us when we were making this decision. And anyway, later I got a call from the bishop. He said, I feel like we owe you a huge apology. I don't think that your daughter got the welcoming that she deserved. And so then it became the pressure on me to be like, no, it's fine. Like I had to soothe him because he had taken like our happiness and our welcoming in his hands. And if we didn't feel welcome, or if we weren't ready to just like embrace the new word with open arms, it was because they did something wrong.
Right.
And now it just puts so much pressure and responsibility on us to be like, no, it's okay, right? So they were judging our boundaries.
Yeah.
And you can see, like, just from those two examples, how gross it can get when you judge somebody's boundaries.
And also, I feel like that is him not knowing what was his to own, and then letting you have what you have to own.
Yeah.
Because I think that's also part of boundaries, is allowing other people to own their property.
Yes.
To do the things that they want to do and not make it mean something about me.
Yes.
So it's like, I have this course, this part in my course where I teach to like, what other people think about you is not your business. Right now, I also think of myself as I am in other people's lives because they're my family, or they're my, community members, or I'm on the road with them or whatever. Like I own how I want to behave. Right. But then I just release everyone else to think whatever it is that they want to think about me. And then if I'm the bishop, right, then I want to make sure that I have in place the things that I want to, how I want to fellowship and, whatever. But I don't know, unless someone said something to me about, hey, this new family felt like they didn't get a welcoming because this thing happened. Right. Then I would probably address that, but just let other people have their experience. It's their experience. Just let them have it. You create the environment that you have control over. You weed the flowers in your yard or whatever it is that you want to do. And then what everyone else experiences, you need to let them have that experience. And if you can help in that way, then for sure, but don't insert help where help has not been asked for. In a lot of times.
Because I know some people, they expect the red carpet to be rolled out anytime they join a new group of any kind. And then you just have to ask, like, is that a realistic expectation? Do you get to own their property in that way? And that, so that takes us back to a good point that I like to ask when people are dealing with boundary problems. You need to ask yourself, why do they merit this real estate in your life? Why do they get a vote in what you do? Why do they get a vote? How did they merit it? Like, I know, like this conversations I have with people about how they felt about people in high school and the extreme lengths they go in their adulthood to like prove that group in high school wrong, or that person, or that parent, or that like whatever. And the question I can always ask is, wow, they seem to own a lot of real estate in your life. Even still, what did they do to merit that? It's an honor to be a part of somebody's life, to have that kind of influence. So what did they do to merit that in your life? And then you can ask yourself, Well, I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe
Because-
they didn't actually.
Because a lot of that is we're giving it to them. We've opened that, we've given them that real estate.
Yeah.
But that, why?
Mhm.
Take it back. They didn't
Mhm.
earn it.
Mhm.
They're not safe. Don't give it to them. Close that gate to
Mhm.
them.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And I also think about it. Like, people have different personalities and, whatever. And my personality is open. I love people. I love all the people. I'm intrigued by people. I love to, learn things about all kinds of people, and so my capacity is open. My capacity is big. Like I can hold a lot of relationships at once. You can think of it as, me on a stage with a bunch of people isn't overwhelming to my energy. Like I have thoughts about that and I have self judgments about that, right? But my energy as a person, I can hold the space for a big group of people. But there are people who can't. There are people that, like, that would be an energy suck for them. That would be really, really overwhelming. They could probably get themselves to do it, but then they would need a nap after because it takes a lot of energy from them to facilitate something like that. And I'm an extrovert. And so that actually fuels me. Like if I'm in front of a crowd and I'm talking or teaching or, whatever it is, mentoring, whatever, I actually gain energy from other people. That's just my personality. That's how I am. Right. And so to know that about myself when I'm thinking about putting in boundaries or asking myself what my boundaries are, I'm going to use that as reference, that I actually can hold lots of relationships at once, or I can hold the energy in a room with a lot of people. And so my boundaries are going to be a little bit different than someone who can't. Right. So yeah.
I don't schedule a bunch of stuff on Sunday.
Yeah.
I just hung out with a bunch of people for 2.5, 3 hours if there's meetings. I have to come home and put like a nap
Mhm.
before I go to family events or have people over. Like, I just know that about me. If I don't get that, I start to behave poorly because my willpower is, now that I understand willpower, like my battery is just drained.
Yeah.
So in order to set myself up for the most success, I have to put that gap. Like,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah. And I think this is all a really great conversation to have because it makes us more self-aware. And being self-aware is the secret to the universe. If you can be self-aware and you can give yourself what you need and you know what you need and you know the reasons why and you know how to ask for it, you know how to ask yourself for it and give it to yourself, and you know how to ask someone else to give it to you if that's what you need, and that communication is there, then you're just going to be a much happier person. But you can't have those conversations if you don't know yourself. Like you could never ask Patrick for a 2-hour time, whether you take a nap or whether you take a bath or whether you read a book or whether you just go for a walk or like whatever. That time needs to be yours for you to recharge, for you to level out your energy, whatever that is. You would never be able to ask for that or let him know that you needed it if you hadn't been watching yourself and understanding yourself.
Or if I didn't think I had the right to, if I didn't think I owned it.
Mhm.
If I
Yeah.
thought that my family owned my time or that the church owned my time, then I would be like, well, you shouldn't need it.
Mhm.
It's selfish for you to ask, And
Mhm.
then this is like, I'm not asking. It's my time. I'm not
Right.
saying, family, can I please have this? I'm saying, family, I'm taking this time.
Mhm.
Door closed. You wake
Yeah.
me up, there will be a consequence.
Yeah.
Right? Like it becomes like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, it's whether it's an ask or whether it's a tell or like that can get kind of sticky. That language can get kind of sticky, but I think it's respect.
Yes.
Like I have respect for my husband and he has respect for me. And so when we have these conversations and I say, this is what I need, I let him know what my needs are. Then he says, how can I help you facilitate that? Because he respects me and he respects my time and I respect him because I'm going to him saying, these are the needs that I have. This is what it looks like to me. What do you think? And then he says, well, I think it looks like this. How can we compromise? And maybe after we get home from church, it's a 2-hour nap for mom. Like that's how we communicate. That's how you ask for what you need. Is you.
That is a great sign of healthy boundaries, because you have total confidence that the people around you have your best interest in mind. Right? But somebody who was in my situation, words are very sticky for me because I didn't have the environment where people cared about me. I was literally an appliance, and if I could give it, they would take it, and they would demand that I gave 20% more. So that is a sign of good, healthy boundaries, and that you're in a good group who loves and cares about you. So that's awesome. And again, it's a property. Like if you are with neighbors who respect your boundary, and you know that at any time when you say, okay, property's off limits, they leave, there's no fight. Then you're like, I don't need to have barbed wire at the top of my fence. Like it doesn't, like the fence even just feels like just for this principle, you know what I mean? But when you have groups of people where you're like, they burn my fences down, they came into my house and slept in my bed, you know what I mean? Like, so then those kinds of things. And again, that's just that, like, because really boundaries, what it does is it's really more for you.
Yeah, right. Boundaries are for you.
You. It doesn't matter if other people understand, agree, respect, like whatever. When you have total confidence that you own it, and you're constantly messaging that to yourself and like reminding you, like, I own this. I have 1000% right, ability, whatever, to state this and to protect this. Then that's what you need. And you will attract people who respect boundaries when you have good, healthy boundaries. People who don't like boundaries, when you have good consequences, they go away because they don't get from you what you want. They go find somebody else. And then you just fill your life with beautiful people because you have space for it. That was it. That was one of, like, I was always consumed with drama and toxic people because they sucked all of me. I had no time, no energy for goodness because it was all sucked by toxicity. I didn't know how to rejuvenate myself. I didn't know what was mine. Like I had literally just become the family appliance. I was a really good appliance, but I was just an appliance. Yeah.
This is such a great conversation. So if anybody that's watching it live has any questions, pop them in the comments. If you're watching this on the replay and you have questions, pop them in the comments. And if you want to reach out to either one of us for something that's a little bit more personal or specific or something to this topic, that's fine too. And we're going to do these lives every Monday. So if you want to get on our email lists so that you can know when these lives are happening and what times, then also reach out to us or go to our bios wherever you're at and try to hop on our email lists, and we'll keep you informed. So anything you want to say to end, Ruth?
And I know when I was learning about boundaries, I'll tell you this, a book that I love about boundaries called Boundaries by Doctors Cloud and Doctors Townsend. It is amazing. If you have any of these symptoms of poor boundaries, rebellion, counterdependence, resentment, concern about other people's opinion of you, yelling, angry, like read the book. I just think that everyone should be like middle school.
Yeah, required reading.
Material. But I would say, especially in the world today, boundaries are so messed up.
Important. Yeah, and they're so messed up. Yeah.
And then I would say, so when you do start to apply boundaries with people who are toxic, they push back. They don't like it. Because what it does is it forces people to own stuff that they haven't had to own before. And we do it too.
Yeah.
It forces us to own stuff we haven't owned before, we don't want to own, because it's hard. It's hard to own yourself when it's easier to dump it on other people. It's easier to tell somebody else that they have to mow your yard than to go mow it yourself, right? Same thing. And I would just say, the more pushback you have from somebody, the more important that boundary is. It's just more of a sign that boundary is necessary. And then just like in my case, with the people that I was dealing with, it was quite abusive. Again, I thought I literally needed to be checked into an institution. That is how, and I needed my children to be taken from me. I was like, that's how bad it had gotten. And when I started putting those boundaries, it wasn't pretty. But I would never have the beautiful life that I had if I didn't start to reclaim that real estate from toxic people. And I will say, those people are still like they're still in my life. And I have gotten better. They've been able to be reintroduced back into my life, right? Because I have total confidence in what I own and how I'm going to behave around them. Like I no longer give into their crap. And just like a child, like it works with your children too. Your child tantrums when you tell them no. But if you just hold your boundaries, hold your consequences, they grow up. They stop tantruming because it stops being an effective tool. Now, your children, you can't kick out of your house, right?
I mean, you can. Some people do.
I mean, you're not your 7-year-old.
Yeah.
Right. But usually, unless you're dealing with like a crazy pathological problem, which most children, like no children in the statistics of it, are that bad. But when, like, you just know when you're consistent with the way you discipline your boundaries and your consequences, the tantrums stop. And that's how it is with all people. Either they go away or they behave better around you, at least while they're around you. And that's all that you can influence is how people behave around you regarding your property, those kinds of things. And that's the goal. So I think we're gonna have lots of conversations about this because it is so important, and we'll get into more like levels and elements and stuff. But I just know that when I started doing boundaries, I was like, okay, I get it on paper or the definition just told me, but how do I apply it in my life? So that's, I think that's, it's.
And how do I apply it with this particular situation? I have this particular situation that's bothersome, that I'm struggling with. And I know that there needs to be a talk around boundaries, but I'm not sure how to do that. I don't know I don't know what part's mine. I don't know what part's theirs. And that's what we do with our clients, is help them figure out specific situations, and helping figure out what is your part, what's theirs is huge in not being sad anymore, or angry or resentful. Yeah. So, yeah. Stressed, anxiety, like not being anxious all the time so much. So all of these things that that we're struggling with in the world can be helped with this conversation. So good. Okay. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week on another live. Take care.